Good evening, everyone. We're so happy to see you here tonight to honor Black History Month. My name is Sarah Henry. I'm the city's public information officer, and I'm helping with the Zoom tonight, along with Sierra Campagna from the Alameda Free Library. Before I turn things over to our host tonight, local historian Rasheed Shabazz, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Alameda Library for sponsoring this and other events celebrating Black History Month. Please note that we have all participants muted, and we'll post a recording of this conversation with Black families on the city and the library's YouTube channel. Our host tonight, Rasheed Shabazz, is a husband, son, brother, and uncle. He's a multimedia storyteller, urban planning historian, and youth development professional. Rasheed was born in Oakland and raised in the West End of Alameda. He attended Longfellow, Chipman, and Encinal schools. Rasheed studied African American Studies and Political Science at the University of California, Berkeley, and is currently completing his master's in City and Regional Planning at Berkeley. He's also working on a book about the history of African Americans and housing in Alameda. Thank you, Rasheed, for joining us tonight and hosting us. Turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the City of Alameda, the main library, and the Friends of the library. This is, I think, the fourth year I've been able to host something with the library, starting in 2016, focused on the Black History Month theme. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to initiate a conversation. So thanks again, Sarah and everyone at the city. The 2021 theme for Black History Month is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. Now, this is a theme that comes from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which is the organization which was founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1915. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson is called the father of Black History Month because in 1926, he founded Negro History Week. And so I know there's some conspiracy theories out in the world that February was chosen for Black History Month because it's the shortest month of the year. This idea that once again, Black folks are getting the short end of the stick, if you will. But in fact, Dr. Carter G. Woodson chose a specific week in February because Frederick Douglass was born in the month of February. Although it's not known specifically which date, because unfortunately enslaved people were not able to always celebrate birthdays at that time. But that was the month in which Frederick Douglass was born, or this is the month in which Frederick Douglass is born, as well as the former President Abraham Lincoln. And so by 1976, Negro History Week expanded to be a full month. And for many of us, Black History Month is 365 days or 365.25 days a year. And so with that, I want to share a few slides with you all to frame tonight's conversation. So bear with me as we do some technological experimentation. You know, these screen shares can often be something else. So how are we looking as far as the screen there?
We can see it.
It's good. Awesome. So I hope the slides look better as we go. So this, again, the title of tonight's conversation is The Black Family, a conversation with Black families of Alameda. And what we'll do is I'm going to give an overview of the 2021 theme. I'm going to give a little bit of history about a few Black families in Alameda. And then we're going to get into our conversation and I'll introduce the folks that we get to have a conversation with tonight. And then we'll follow up with a Q&A utilizing the chat feature primarily, but we may be able to, if it's not too unwieldy for our hosts, may be able to let some folks ask questions directly and enter the conversation. So first with the theme, this is a slide from, again, the organization, the ASALH, Dr. Carter G. Woodson's group, talking about the 2021 theme. And oftentimes there's different controversies about studying the Black family as if it's one monolithic experience, or even Black or Blackness as if it is one experience without variation. And throughout history, sociologists, anthropologists, historians, they've explored the Black family to understand the Black experience. And there's been different paradigms, different ways of trying to understand the family. And so in the North American context, it often may start with a conversation about being enslaved or being free. But then there's also conversations about whether the family is patriarchal or matrifocal or matriarchal, meaning there's a history in this country with families and legal decisions being very patriarchal, but for many African Americans with lineage in West Africa, where there were matrilineal societies, there's a different question. Well, how much of that history have we retained in how our families are structured, how we understand ourselves to be connected to each other? Then there's questions about, is it single or dual headed, right? So is there a single man of the house, or is there a partnership? And then, is the family only about blood relations? Or, as some of us know, we have fictive kin. So my brother Terrence, y'all will get to hear from him, or sister Leela, or I'd probably never call him my nephew because I'm not that cool, but Omari is a younger person that I look up to. And so we use these terminology to express a kinship. But is the family simply nuclear, meaning a traditionally or quote unquote traditionally mother and father and then child, or is it extended, going to uncles and cousins all being part of that family? And then lastly, is the Black family Black, or is it interracial, multiracial? And so this is some of the historical conversations that happen about the Black family, and how do you analyze and understand it. And so I encourage folks to, utilize I'll put a link in the chat before the end of the event to look at the website of the Association for the Study of African Life and History. And again, to deepen your understanding about your own family, as well as the historical Black families. So I generally, my focus is on housing, and I'm interested in where people live. Are people able to rent or own? What are the different experiences focused around housing? And so I recently actually Tuesday night, I came across a document that showed the home ownership rates for the city of Alameda. And out of, I think it's about 14,000 homeowners in the city of Alameda, according to this Alameda County draft analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, there were 165 Black households that owned homes in Alameda. And so this is something that people may have known a few years ago during the Renters Week of Action. The organization Policy Link and the National Equity Atlas published this, which showed that 93% of Black families or Black households in Alameda were renters. And so this is not something that was accidental or simply choice, but it's from a long legacy. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I attempt to talk about a few Black families in Alameda history. So first, I often like to highlight one of the first three Black folks, and you can see the B for his racial categorization, but Oni Douglas, same last name as Frederick Douglass. And this is from the 1860 census. And so Oni Douglas was a laborer who was born in Kentucky and later went to Connecticut and then came out west with someone he worked for and lived in their home, the home of the Brower family. But by 1870, he was living independently in Alameda. And in 1871, there's records that show he registered to vote. Now, the census record also shows that he was married, but didn't live with the person he was married to. And so there's not that much information we can get from documents, but we can still understand that the fact that someone still went through the process of getting a legal marriage shows that even after the experience of enslavement, or in fact, in this instance, at the same time that slavery was still the law of the land, that there was concern about being married and having that type of family relationship and bond. Moving on, I'm jumping through history because I don't want to talk that much about history. I want to hear from people who have different histories. This is an image that was on some of the promotional materials, and this is the family of this is one part of the Hackett family. And so this image from the far side is on the far right is Sylvester Hackett, and then to the far left, our left, is Alice Hackett, or pardon me, excuse me, Marie Hackett. And this is in, I think, 1917 at their home on Grand Street. And so this is an image which I think it counters some of the, I'm sure it would have countered some of the images or ideas about Black people at this time. Their dress sort of signifying middle class status or identity, but just looking real sharp. And with the brother in the back with that fresh bow tie. And so I like to show this image because, you know, again, this is over 100 years ago and Black folks were here in Alameda. Now, um, although we were here, there was some effort to keep us out of here. And so this is an image of a map commonly called a redlining map. This was made in 1937 by the Homeowners Loan Corporation. And simply put, redlining drew up lines in different areas to say these areas were good for investment and these were not. And unfortunately, race was considered a factor in whether or not a neighborhood was good for investment. And so you can see highlighted here at the bottom of the larger map, but then on the map at the top and the right, you can see the north side of Alameda, where you had a large presence of Asian Americans and the majority of African Americans in Alameda at that time lived. That was the area that was redlined, which means people who lived there could not get funds to renovate their homes during the Depression, or if you wanted to move there, you could not get a loan, or it would be very difficult to get a loan there. However, other areas were rated higher because of the lack of what they called infiltration or invasion. And so over time, you start to see, and this map to the left shows most Black folks by 1940 lived in the northern part of the island. And then you can see from this project map where a large, what was called an influx of Black folks lived in these housing projects, which were on the north and the west end of Alameda. And so oftentimes when we think about the different neighborhoods in Alameda, East End, West End, these housing decisions were part of that. But as I study households and I study housing, I realized that a household is not necessarily a family. So you can be a family and be living across multiple households for various reasons. And at the same time, there may be multiple families in one household. So housing is not the only way in which to understand, you know, families. And so with that, I actually want to just end with just sharing one more image with a number of different families. This is at the corner of Webster and Taylor Street. You can see the flag of the post office in the background. And I am not promoting them, but if you want to get me a blueberry pie, you can. This is right next to the Nations, blueberry cheesecake, whole thing. And this is an image of Mabel Tatum leading a march in 1964. And they went from a bank that is on that corner where the head of the housing authority lived back over to Eagle and Webster where the housing authority was. And so I highlight this because when Mabel Tatum was leading the Citizens Committee for Low Cost Housing, the head of the housing authority would often question her and say, "Where is your husband at?" And reading these documents, it makes me wonder, was he implying that she shouldn't be speaking because she's a woman? Or is it somehow fixating on some idea of this woman without a husband? When in fact, her husband was fighting for the United States during the Vietnam War. And so there are a lot of families that have lived in Alameda with a lot of different stories. And I hope that's what we'll get to hear a little bit about tonight. And so again, I wanted to just give a little bit of historical context as far as how people have studied and understood the Black family, but also just share a few insights of a few people, a few families that have lived in Alameda as well. So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I'm going to introduce our illustrious panelists for this evening. So first, I want to start off with the Thomas family. So Sandy and Daryl Thomas are siblings, and they're fourth generation Alamedans. That means they've been here for their family's been here for 4 generations. Sandy attended what was then called Haight School and Encinal High School. And I recently learned that she was the homecoming queen. And I'm not surprised to hear that.
Thank you, Daryl.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah, he told me I learned that last night. She's the regional director for VMware Healthcare West, and she's previously consulted startups after she worked for 16 years at Microsoft, and even before that in Silicon Valley. She attended Stanford University. She lives in Alameda with her 19-year-old Ava, who is a sophomore at NYU. Daryl, her brother, lives in Alameda with his wife of 30 years, Jessica. And as a young person, he was very active in the Alameda Boys Club in groups like the Torch Club and the Keystone Club. He graduated from Haight Elementary School. And when he went to Encinal, he was all league in football, basketball, and later at the urging of Don Grant, joining the track team, also in track. He later went on to UC Davis, and he's now a licensed real estate broker and has a 35-year history in working for affordable housing. And so very grateful for them being present today. Leela Richardson, or Leela Dilts, and Leela Richardson and her children, Imani and Omari Dilt, have lived in Alameda for 19 years. Originally from Santa Barbara, California, she has family ties in Texas, Louisiana, and St. Kitts. Leela planted new roots in Alameda when Imani was just 5 years old, and Omari was born a year later at Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley, making him a true Bay Area kid of all the family. Now, regular family discussions for them included anything from which festival to go to, gender politics, how to protest safely, Bay Area rappers, and LA beats. Warrior fandom versus Lakers loyalty. I can see the gold on right now, and more. But the Bay raised his family of 3, baptizing them in the love and support of friends who have become chosen family. And we're grateful for you all being here today. And I know there might be a third addition in the Zoom. And then next, Helen Rainwater and her granddaughter, Raquel Williams, have lived in Alameda for 10 years. As a retiree, Helen enjoys the relaxed atmosphere, beaches, and other community events. And Raquel is a senior at Alameda High School. She previously attended Lum Bears, and the Academy of Alameda. And Williams participated in West Coast Dance, Girls Inc., and AYB, or Alameda Youth Basketball. And many of us know of Raquel from her more recent activism. And then last but certainly not least, Terrence and Tayari Holiday have lived in Alameda for 8 years. Terrence works in high school education, and his true passion lies in helping young people identify and achieve their career goals. Tayari currently owns and operates a natural and holistic sales brokerage. They've been married for 7 years, and they have 2 children, Lily, 12, and Brandon, 23. They've rented in Alameda, and they hope to purchase a reasonably priced home here where their family can grow and thrive. They're very passionate about supporting small businesses and working with organizations that uplift the community. So I'm really grateful for you all for being here and being present. And we really wanted to have both a multi-generational and intergenerational conversation this evening. And so I'd like to just start off with either Daryl or Sandy. And I mean, you know, y'all are siblings, y'all can work out, you know, who can go first and all of that, right?
That'll be a first. But
y'all have to say who goes first. I don't know.
Before we start, I wanted to say hi to Valdez. When you were talking about the Hackett family earlier, he's a direct descendant. So Valdez, hello to you. Daryl, you can take it away since you and Val were very close, are very close.
Yeah, so yeah, I met Val, when we were 2 years old. And at that time, I didn't know, anything about his family or my family. As we went through middle school, at Haight School, we were often, one of three in the class. How would you say? Through our grade going through. And then we both went on to Haight School. And, at this time, I didn't have any idea about my family. So remember when I just got out of college, it was me and Val were hanging out over at his house on Grand Street. And we were just talking. He says, "Hey, do you mind running with me? I got to go do something for my grandfather." And I said, "Sure, let's go." And so we go out to the open library. It's Golden Gate branch on San Pablo, 55th. And so his grandfather, I'd met him many times before. And he says, as soon as I walked in, he says, "Hey, how you doing, Thomas?" I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" He says, "Let me show you your family." And I'm like, what are you talking about?" He goes, "Let me show you your family. Your family is one of the first descendants, first Black families in Alameda." And it was just, I was completely surprised because my mother had never spoken much about it. We knew that she was a graduate of Alameda High in 1940. And she grew up on Grand Street taking care of her grandmother and stuff. So at that point in time, it just opened up a whole new world to me. I had a sense of pride that I didn't have growing up. And so it was just really prideful. And I think for our family, what became real is like we lost our mother, 4 years ago at the age of 93. She had a very, good life. And I think for our family, then it became real. What became real, and I think it was with Rashid. You started speaking with my nephew Will, and then it expanded to all the family. And so, there's a lot of pride, now knowing that that's our generation, and it's very important from our standpoint is that we maintain this legacy in Alameda because it's it's what we call home, and it's been, for me, I have a number of relationships growing up in the Boys Club, and Val was with me as well, as part of the Torch and Keystone Clubs. And, we got to go on trips that our families couldn't afford to. And so it was a lot of exposure that actually taught us how to actually communicate with people of other races. So for us, it was a great melting pot because we grew up with Black, Hispanic, Filipino, Asian. It just didn't matter. It didn't matter. And so even today, I think it was 10 years ago, Val, we had a reunion with our Haight School classmates. And it was just like, we hadn't seen each other, it was just like, yesterday. So it's, it's been for us, it's been a really enjoyment here living in Alameda. Now, that's not to say there wasn't challenges that we didn't overcome with some of the racism and what have you, but we learned how to deal with that. And a lot of times sports help transcend that. So, it's been good. So Sandy,
Yeah, well, so I would say our mom was born in the house we were raised on Buena Vista, and she was born in 1923. And her father built that house. It was a red-lined area. And her grandfather built a house on Grand Street. He came out from Greenville, South Carolina in 1892. And when Daryl says it got real when my mother passed, I think that's when I had all the questions I wanted to ask her. Our grandfather, David Sloan, was 30 years old, and he brought his family of 5, I believe. He named his first son Freeman, and I remember Uncle Free a little bit. But you wonder what was in the mind of a 30-year-old Black man in 1892 crossing the country. How did he do it? Why did he do it? How did he stop in Alameda? My mother would tell us that she remembered before the Bay Bridge was built. And so we had this sense of history, and we knew we were one of the first Black families. But for me, this is kind of funny. I couldn't wait to leave Alameda. I'd be on Park Street and somebody would say, "You look like Willie. You look like Daryl. You look like Denise." I could not get away with anything. So I wanted to leave. And I did for many years, but and I was able to bring my daughter back, and she graduated from Alameda High. in 2019. So if you think my mom graduated in 1940, we've got a great history here. And like Daryl says, it has been full of challenges, but it's also been very, very rich. I mean, I often say that what stood between us and a very middle-class life was the fact that we owned a house in Alameda. We still have it in the family, which is lovely. And there are actually 5 households of us in Alameda, and there's 6 generations with my nephew, Will, who you went to school with, and his sons, Cameron and Adrian, being here in Alameda. And I'm going to stop talking and let other people talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for starting off. And, I want to just start a first question. I think I'll shift to Leela first, kind of going in order of how long y'all been in here in Alameda. I know sometimes people do this in these public comments. It's kind of like some form of nativism, like, oh, I've lived in Alameda so long that, not coming from that standpoint, but just to show like people have had different experiences coming to Alameda and different perceptions. And so I'm interested for y'all, how and when did you come to Alameda? And what were some of your, either your motivation for coming here and some of your initial impressions?
And I just really appreciate Daryl and Sandy's history and background. My family traveled from Texas on my father's side to Oxnard, California, and we're one of the first Black families down there, and a very large family. So I can identify with that experience. And I too left for that same reason of like, you look like you're, so-and-so. So I definitely can relate to that. We just sold our family home, sadly, just in 2020. And so that, shifts history when you think about family history in that way. We came here. Yeah, I came here at the time to go to San Francisco State University, and loved Bay Area, and just coming from a smaller town and wanting to really be around a lot of the activism and the history that the Bay had to offer, and was really surprised by pockets of segregation. I never heard of Alameda. I grew up and went to a school, that street was named Alameda, and so I never even knew there was this island city. And a friend of friends told us about, you should check out Alameda, as we were looking for places to live. And first impressions, it was definitely challenging. I remember driving into Alameda before we moved in here, and there was a man in a truck with a Confederate flag, and right by where the library is. And so I that sticks in my mind, because coming up in Santa Barbara, you had different gaps and different disparities, but you didn't see a lot of that, like Southern, remnants around, issues around race. And so we had different areas. It came up in different ways, especially around class, and very small Black community in Santa Barbara. So that's something that stood out to me, like, oh, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're in a different kind of pond. And that experience stood out to me. And it definitely, drove me to continue to work in the community. It's kind of how we got here, stayed here. I decided to stay and, raise my children here. And Omari was born in Berkeley, and my daughter went to Lum Bears too, Raquel. So big up to Lum Bears, went to Lum, and then both my kids went to elementary school and middle school and high school, well, except for Omari, but in Oakland. And that's a choice that I made based on what was happening here. And so we kind of got both the best worlds of being here in Alameda and then also being in other parts of the Bay too.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Just to be clear, so that was like in the 2000s, like the new millennium, someone was driving around with the flag?
Yeah, that was 2002. Yeah,
all right.
2002. And it looked, downtown Park Street looked very different. Webster Street looked very different, so it was, yeah, that was an experience.
Right on. Well, I want to hear a little bit about Raquel, and I want to say Miss Rainwater's experience. I feel really awkward trying to call you Helen, but that's
okay. Do you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. And how we got to Alameda. Well, we're basically a West Coast family. I'm originally from Seattle, our family was one of the first Black families there. My mother was born in 1917. And so her people had gotten there obviously before that. But we've lived on the West Coast the whole time. My daughter was born in San Francisco, and I retired in Sacramento. So we pretty much did the whole West Coast. After my retirement and my husband passed away, my daughter got a job down here in Alameda with the Raiders. And so I followed them down here so I could support her and my granddaughter. And it's been wonderful. So I'll turn it over to Raquel.
Yeah, so I was in second grade when we moved here. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I was like, oh my gosh, this sticks in my head, my first impressions of the city, really. But I remember kind of coming from Sacramento for like kindergarten and first grade. My class was way less diverse. And I did notice it. I was like, this is different. Like my school for kindergarten and first grade was just looked a lot different than the class that I came into in second grade. And it definitely just was a bit of a culture shock, but I was so young that I was able to just, you like these things, I like these things, let's just play around and be kids together. So I definitely lived the childhood experience here. What are your first impressions of it?
Well, I think for Raquel, it was very nice because she was able to get into a lot of activities. She was into dance for like 10 years. Then later she discovered basketball, and she's, most of you may know, she's on the Alameda High School basketball team, and she was the captain of the team last year. Hopefully we'll have a season this year, but next year she's going to be going to the University of Rochester and be playing on their team. So that was good for her and made a lot of friends that way as far as diversity goes. And she's always just been very active and very smart, and took swimming lessons and all the things that kids do. And it's just been really fun here because it's kind of like a Mayberry, so your kids can go outside and play. And that we like it.
Yeah, drive 25, keep the kids alive. That's Alameda, right?
All right.
You know,
I'm gonna brag about you.
So yeah, just accept it, Raquel. You know, you got a lot of fans, but it's awesome to hear from your grandmother as well. You know, one thing I think we'll come back to is just hearing you talk about your childhood experiences, Raquel. And I know Amari was also raised here. I think it's a different experience for people who have been raised here opposed to coming here as an adult. Like I had the pleasure of walking with a mask on today with my childhood friend around Woodstock Park. And so we grew up in the neighborhood, and we actually played on the play structure until some kids came, and then they kicked us out. But, thinking about that experience, you know, I imagine coming here as an adult, it would be much harder to try to find friends in the same way. And so I am grateful that there's a friend I found, Brother Terrence, and with his wife, Tayati. They've been here in Alameda for, coming up on 10 years now. And so I'm really interested in, if you can all share your experience, where's your family from, and how and when you came to Alameda.
Let's see. How did we get to Alameda together, or how did we? So we're both from the South. We're both. She was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Houston, Texas, and just the journey of life, brought us to California. She went to high school here. I mean, I can't tell your story. You tell your story.
Well, my mother is originally from San Francisco, and but my dad's from Tennessee. My father moved to California when I was young, and I stayed back east with my mother and moved around a lot from Atlanta to Louisiana, Virginia, Maryland. And then when I was about 15, I moved back here to live with my father, and I went to Skyline in Oakland for like a year and a half. And I stayed here for a little while. Then I lived in LA for about 11 years. And then I moved back here in 2010. So I had family who lived in Alameda. I mean, I grew up here. I was always back and forth. And I just, I knew Alameda was a nice place to live. So when we met, we lived, well, for a little while in Richmond and then in Oakland. But I wanted to move to Alameda just because, you know, it's pleasant and the beach is here and the weather is great. And it was a place that I felt like I could feel safe. So that's kind of
Yeah.
how.
And I previously lived in Alameda, and you call them the BVs, but it was summer house when I moved there. And so I came, you know, just traveling. You know, I worked in the music industry, and that's taken me places. And I ended up in Alameda. And I always said, even when I was younger, that Buena Vista, and I always wanted to live on an island. But I was thinking maybe like Barbados or something like that, or Belize. But you know, maybe that manifestation brought me to Alameda, which is an island, and I'm just as pleased with it. You know, so when we were living in Oakland, I said, you know what, I'm going to go find us a place, and I went, and we went to the
Belena Village.
Belena Village, you know, and I saw it, and we got a spot overlooking the water. No, it was Belena Village. Yes, Belena Village, right on the water. Yeah. And so we got a spot right on the water, and that's when that started our relationship with Alameda. So yeah, we love it, everything about it. And you know, really our community and our home is with us and our family. So even if there was some shade, of course, you know, I got stopped a lot of times, you know what I'm saying? Just, I guess, by being an unfamiliar person in an unfamiliar car, you know, never received a ticket, but just being pulled over like, hey, you're too close to the person in front of you, or, you know, you're not going 25, which is, I guess, newbie rules, you know, or whatever. But even that didn't deter me from wanting to live in Alameda. Yeah, and I think it's a great place. I really want to stay. We really want to stay and purchase, you know.
And now we live on the East End.
Mm-hmm.
We originally moved to the West End, but we live on the East End now. And we found a beautiful place owned by a woman who has her family had been here for generations. And really, like, we wouldn't have been able to afford this place without her kindness. You know, she just, I think they didn't need to hike up the rent, you know, the way they could. And they didn't. So
yeah, we're blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and sharing, you know, what some of the things that you like about Alameda, what brought you here, or things that y'all love. And you know, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, what folks have noticed in Alameda since you've been here. So you shared a little bit about some of the things that you all like. You know, sometimes in Alameda, folks like change or don't like change or still want change. And I'm interested in just what you all have observed from the time that you all have been here. What's changed in Alameda since you've been here? And so I'll actually maybe starting a different way. I want to start with Terrence and Tayati. You know, just in the last, you know, few years, like what's changed and what you've seen?
Well, first of no, I love the parklets on Park, but not a fan of the traffic that the parklets bring, and that, you know, and those are aesthetics, you know, and those I think are things we can learn to live with, but it is a difference, and it does cause a shift in a way of life.
More traffic in general, I think, and just more building. Like there's so, like, I mean, we used to go to the gym at Palladium and there was nothing over there. Now they're building all those houses. I mean, they've just built so many complexes everywhere in the short amount of time that we've been here. And the traffic has definitely gotten, you know,
Thick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. You know, it's interesting because I was at the I was on the Navy base today looking at some of the new buildings, and you know, having been here since, you know, the time I was here, I remember when the base was open. And so me and my friend, we were joking about his family was in the Navy, and so I couldn't even get on the base without him. And so, you know, while there's this perception like traffic has increased, I remember like what it was like when the base was still open. And so just thinking about, you know, the different perceptions of when we've been here and what we experienced. Um, for for Lila and Omari, what have you noticed? What's changed since you've been here in Alameda?
Well, I think something that's been major for me noticing is a lot more like modernization of the buildings or the stores at least. Because I feel like when I was younger, Alameda used to feel really like small or like small businesses at least. But now I feel like I'm seeing a lot more like mom and pop shops get filled in with like big corporation things or like Landing becoming like this big shopping center where it used to just be kind of empty. And just like you was just saying, the base it used to be real empty. Me and my friends would kind of walk around and like go back towards the estuary, and now there's a bunch of these super nice houses back there. Even on Park Street, as you were just saying, like the Park West, the little parking and all the businesses just becoming newer and it feeling more like a little shoppy area than just a bike ride skate town. That's how I feel like I used to feel being around here, but now it feels a lot more just like a lot more
Would,
stores.
would you want to hang out on Park Street now?
No, not at all. I used to go like on a regular with my friends, but now it just feels too packed and it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same, I guess.
Right on. What about Helen? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lila. Anything? Okay. Yeah. For Helen and Raquel.
Well, I guess we'd have to agree with everyone about the traffic and the parking. In fact, we've thought about that sometimes when it's hard to get off the island. What would you do in an emergency? And even with the uprisings that they're having in other parts of the country, if we needed to leave, would we be able to even get out of town? Because the tunnel can get backed up and the other streets can get backed up. So that's kind of a problem. But and I also agree the shopping center, like we're over near South Shore, it's not nearly as interesting anymore. A lot of the small shops that were, you know, seem like family owned shops are now just vacant. A lot of vacancies there.
Yeah, I agree. I think I used to go to South Shore a lot, like with like my neighbors or like my friends and everything. And it's, I mean, I haven't done that in a really long time. Like I still go, but it's not, I feel like I go grab what I needed to why I went there and I come back. Well, I feel like before I used to just like linger and we would just like go in the stores and sit outside, but it definitely became more commercialized for me. And I think it's the same thing with like the Landing. Like I went to AOA and I remember when Target opened and like when that was like the big thing was like, and it kind of, we shifted from like going to hang out to like at the park after school to like, let's go walk around Target. And like that, it's like, it changed for me. I think with that was like our pastime was like, let's go sit and walk through the aisles of Target instead of like going to the park or something. And I think that I've noticed that change of just like commercialization and just like liking big stores that we didn't have when we were younger.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think part of it, you know, just growing up, parks may or may not be seen as more popular for teenagers. And then sometimes we structure our social lives around commerce. So, you know, if I want to go get some Wi-Fi, I got to go buy some coffee or something like that. But they have, you know, when it's open, you can go to the library and actually coffee too. But I think, you know, sometimes we end up structuring our lives around, you know, consumerism. But I'm not going to opine tonight. I want to shift to Sandy and Daryl. You know, what have you all noticed that's what's changed since you've been here in Alameda?
Well, Rashid, when we were growing up, I told you there were 7 of us. It used to cost 35 cents to go to the movies, and we would get 15 cents for spending money. And the cinema grill used to be called Writers, and you could buy French fries for 15 cents, but ketchup cost you 2 cents more. So I've seen a lot of change. I think, you know, one of the biggest changes in terms of the composition of the demography of Alameda is when the Naval Air Station closed, because that was a source of employment for Black people. I know that I spent a couple of summers working in offices on the Naval Air Station, but it seemed that that changed sort of the mix of the population. When Daryl was speaking about the diversity we experienced, a lot of that was due to the folks, the kids, the families that were part of the Naval Air Station. And it used to be kind of a cool place to hang out. They had like an officers club, there was a bowling alley, and it was fun. But so that's one big change. And I would say, you know, I was driving last week and I saw 2 models of Porsche that I did not know existed. So I think people are fleeing San Francisco and coming to Alameda. And you can see the change in the cars that people drive and how they look and how they act. And I'm just hoping it doesn't get to be like San Francisco, because I really don't enjoy going to the city anymore, I'm sad to say. But Daryl, maybe you have something to add?
Yeah, you know, the traffic is kind of relative for us because remember, at the time, I think the Navy was employing probably on the naval base, there's what, 25,000 people. It was like its own city there. So it was very common coming out of Haight School at 3 o'clock, trying to cross over Lincoln, and you would see the people that lived outside of Alameda going to Hayward, San Leandro, they were all going down Lincoln. And there was a lot of traffic. And the same thing going into the tube. If we wanted to go to Smith's in downtown Oakland to get some clothes off of 12th Street, right? You would get on the bus and you would just mosey all the way through. The biggest thing that I do not like, but I do understand it, is the shoreline. Just the views that you have, what they've done now. I understand from a safety perspective why they had to block it the way they did, but I think a lot of us missed the way that freedom down on the shoreline. Change, I would say people's driving habits. I think the police aren't out in force like they used to be. In my day, if someone tried to do a U-turn on Webster, that was automatic ticket. It wasn't even a question. Police officer was going to stop you. You're going over 25. When I say over 25, going 26, 27, that was the ticket. So because you had that enforcement, there was a lot more safety because you knew that you had to respect the rights of pedestrians. So I do miss that. And I see people driving crazy and I think, well, gosh, I'm that old guy now. You know?
No longer driving crazy.
Right.
Wait, Rashid, this is what I want to do. Ask Daryl, how does it feel to live in Alameda for 60 years?
Hey, Daryl.
It's wonderful. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you, Sandy. No, it feels, you know, it's awesome. Like I said, I still have a lot of great friends here. A lot have moved out because of affordability issues.
Yeah.
But it's still the same community, you know, in a lot of respects. To raise a family, you can walk, you know, pretty much in the evenings and not have any issues. I know there's certain things, hot spots that are going on. It's changed a little bit now, especially with the recent increase in shootings. So that's kind of a little bit unnerving because we never had that. But it's wonderful.
We never had a lock on we never carried keys as kids.
Right.
I didn't have a key to a door till I went to college.
Right.
That's how safe Alameda was. I had to figure out how to handle a key when I got to college.
Right. So
yeah, thank y'all for sharing that. I think that sense of being in a small town and despite, you know, or including with the Navy base being here, you know, there's still being a lot of migration, movement, different people cycling in. People still felt this sense of sort of small town or community. But there's a book, I was trying to find it this evening. It's by Gretchen Lemke Santangelo. It's called Abiding Courage. And what she does, she looks at African-American women who migrated to the East Bay during World War II. And one thing she talks about, you know, interviewing these women is how they felt that same sense of safety and security, even in wartime housing projects. And so I think, you know, part of some of that sense of not feeling safe is, because so many people have been displaced because of migration, oftentimes we don't even know people we live next door to for a long period of time. And so, that can contribute to our sense of feeling a part of a community. And, I know my neighbors, and yeah, anyway, I appreciate y'all for sharing some of that. I want to transition a little bit, and we'll have an opportunity for folks to also ask questions and potentially join the conversation. I'm interested in, coming back to the family. What are some of the different challenges your families have experienced here in Alameda? And if it's all right, I want to start with. I don't think Terrence is back yet. If we could just start maybe with Leela.
Yeah, I would say affordability. It's in an interesting way, and I think that's not so much about Alameda, but it is around like the changing times. Coming into the Bay Area at the like end of the bubble, in the early 2000s, I knew coming from an area that was, high rent and expensive, cost of living, coming to the Bay, I was like, okay, I'll be able to handle that transition. But through the years, the rents, I rent and have increased, really high over the years. And, coming into it feeling like, it was really affordable until where I am now, and not a long period of time. It just feels like the rents continue to increase. And it seemed like there was this feeling like Terrence and Tyara had shared of like homeowners who were like, oh, we don't need to charge this much, even if that's the market rate. And I feel like that was the environment that I came into compared to where I am now. It seems like that's not the trend anymore. It's like we want to just keep people who want to be here, families who want to stay, versus we're trying to get the most amount that we can. So I think that's been a challenge. I don't know, what else has been a challenge?
You talk about financials. More for me, like microaggressions or like prejudices, implicit bias that sometimes out in public I want to have like a doubt of that maybe that's not what I'm dealing with, or not what I'm, like that's not what I'm facing right now. But there's definitely been a lot of times like throughout high school and even like junior high, if you want to call it, with my friends out in public, like my few friends from Alameda High or other schools that, because there's not a lot of Black people that I'll have in my classes or involved in sports, but I have my little tight group. And anytime we were out, I would definitely notice a lot more like microaggressions. Definitely, like there's been times I've been followed in stores or like by the clerks, or even like accused of like straight up stealing. And I know a lot of my other friends don't deal with that. Like a lot of my other friends that aren't people of color don't deal with that. Even to the point where my like closest friend since I was young, Jack, like that's definitely been a conversation. A lot of the times they're like, Omar, if you're out somewhere, call Jack. Like if you're out somewhere, call Kevin, who's Jack's dad. Like make sure you have somebody with you who can, advocate for you, because you might not be heard the same way that they'll be heard. So that's definitely a challenge I've faced, but learned how to navigate through my life. That's definitely a big challenge I faced while being here.
Thank you for sharing that, Mari. And one thing I've noticed about you over the years is you've grown, like definitely intellect and maturity, but physically you taller than me now. And I'm curious, at what point did you start to experience this and notice, some of these things that you experience when you're out in public?
I say 7th grade in Alameda, definitely. Because before, like I was at school in Alameda, I started going to school in Alameda in 6th grade. I was in Oakland and Hagenberger. There was things I would do there out and about with my mom that didn't as much feel like because I'm like a young Black kid, but just something that happened like that. We was out traveling, but I definitely feel like it was 7th grade that I started noticing it. And then even becoming, as you're saying, growing and becoming bigger, like noticing that to other people, I'm not a kid. Like I don't even look like a kid. I look like a grown man, even if you don't want to say
It
it.
looks like a kid.
She says, I know that to other people, that's like not the sight they have for me. And so it's definitely something that I have to, think about. Cause yeah, there's this time I was in South Shore with my friend for lunch, and this guy approached her mom and was talking really like disrespectfully, but then like immediately approached me because I was the only male that was there. But I think he assumed that I was way older than I was, and approached me and was talking to me and like trying to get physical. But so not even since then, but other situations like that has definitely made me see that the way I see myself and like my family sees myself is not the same way that the public will see me.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah, that's a whole dissertation. I think, especially because when he transitioned here in 7th grade or 6th grade, I think the intention was to do more things in the city of Alameda because I worked in Oakland and I worked for schools. And that was that intention of like, well, I had one daughter who went to school in Oakland and Oakland School for the Arts and had a different experience. And then I wanted to make sure Omari had more in the city of Alameda experiences. So these are some things that I'm just hearing now in our discussions of his experience of what that meant to be in Alameda, and then having that like in-person kind of those moments about microaggression when the intention was, I want you to be in the city because you'll know more friends, and versus like when you're out of the area, people were going to school and coming from different places, Concord, Pleasanton, commuting. And I wanted him to have more friends that were from, where we were from, where we lived too. So it's interesting to hear that.
Thank you. We often talk about the talk, or amongst many of the talks. And I'm curious, just having a growing Black boy in Alameda, what were some of your concerns with, on one hand, you wanted him to be here and be around his friends and had a expectation of safety, but then also, what he just shared, and I'm sure has shared before, that's not always the experience. So I'm curious, just, have you thought about that, or had you been worried, or what would have been your concerns for your son, or both of your children?
It's interesting because I think we're a pretty live and active family, and participate in a lot of, know your rights and Young, Gifted, and Black, and a lot of, cultural experiences that there's been the talk and those conversations, and a general wide like Bay Area conversation. But in the city of Alameda, I can't say until fairly recently, honestly, having those conversations about like being here, and what that means here, and walking around here. Now he's a licensed driver, and we've already had police contact as a licensed driver. It's a different conversation, I'd say, in the last couple of years than when it was, even 4 or 5 years ago. As you always have these conversations with your kids, no matter what's happening. But yeah, it definitely has changed with the dynamic. Things that I experienced, I don't think as a parent that I expressed, that I thought, I didn't think I was sharing that with my kids, times that I felt like I was profiled or pulled over, or microaggressions, or walking in the store or on the street. I don't think that I was sharing that with them per se of like, this is what's happening in this city, more of general like social conversations and things to be aware of. But I didn't think that I was talking specifically about Alameda. Yeah. So.
Wow, thank y'all. Shifting to Ms. Rainwater, or Helen and Raquel, what are some challenges your family has experienced, and if it's anything specific to since you've been here in Alameda?
I think I've had a really similar experience to Omari in that, just with the microaggressions and just a lot of people feeling like I was less than, and people assuming that I wasn't as smart as I was, or being as shocked that as athletic. People were like, oh, well, obviously you're athletic, so that's just a given. But like when I would be academic or want to have those academic conversations, I always had to advocate for myself in a way I noticed that other students didn't have to do so. Like if a student was given an extra opportunity, I always had to be the first one to be like, well, I want it too. I want to go for it too. And people assumed that I wouldn't. And I think that was definitely something I had to learn about my own had to learn to be self-confident with myself that, you know, as someone who has these goals of high academics, that I had to be my own advocate for it because no one else is going to do it for me. And a lot of people underestimated my intelligence. I remember the first day of AP chemistry, my sophomore year of high school, I walked in and one of the other kids, the first thing goes, do you have the wrong classroom? And I was like, do I? Like, I could, for a whole fact, I was like, do I have the wrong classroom? And he was like, well, this is AP chemistry. And I was like, oh, so I don't. And he was like, oh, so you're taking it. And I was like, yes. And I completely didn't, you know, reflecting on that experience was like, did he think I was too dumb to be in this class? Like, why did he even think that I couldn't take it? And so I think, you know, I kind of always had these experiences where people thought that I wasn't going to be what I was. And I had to kind of create my own identity around academics that people weren't perceiving. And I'm also pretty tall. And so I think that there's this athletic identity that has been connected with me. And as I've played sports my whole life, I think people have been like, oh, she's the athlete. That's her identity, is sports. And wanting to have that complex personality has created challenges because of this assumption that Black people only can do sports and that we can't be multiple things. I think has definitely been a part. I think, yeah, I've dealt with like the microaggressions, and I think another big part of it was the colorism that I wasn't expecting. And I think that that's part of it has been really difficult for me, with just being brown skin and dealing with people and a lot of certain people making me feel as though I was less than because of my skin complexion, and then having to kind of reteach myself what it means to be who I am. And I think that I definitely I go to this very predominantly white and Asian school. I don't have a lot of representation by teachers, by students, and I couldn't compare myself to anyone else. It wasn't, there was no one to compare myself to. Honestly, the probably person I compared myself to was Ava. So actually, if I was going to compare myself to someone, it probably was Ava because she was the BSU president when I was a sophomore. And now I'm the BSU president. So I actually can say.
My Ava?
Yeah.
Johnson?
Yeah. So I can't say if I was looking up to someone, it was Ava through my high school experience. But I didn't have as many like role models that in my school setting, but yeah.
I'd like to say for Raquel's experience in school, we always really tried to encourage her, and I think that gave her a lot of confidence in herself. And I know people would tease her about the way she spoke, and I would tell her, well, you speak like everyone else in our family. And so I think that we need to make sure our kids feel okay about being as Black as they are without being a stereotype of some sort. We don't have to be a stereotype. We can be smart. We can graduate from college. We can have parents that graduate from college. We're not all on the poverty line, even if we don't have as much money as we would like. we do know about professional life and how to be proud of ourselves. Basically the situation that I went to school with in Seattle was very similar to Raquel's, so I can sympathize with her, but at the same time, I'm like, shake it off. We got things to do, so that's how we deal with it. We discuss everything, though.
Yeah, I'm interested in, how, a multi-generational, household, and what kind of conversations y'all may have as a grandmother who was dealing with these same issues, but at a different time. There was no Instagram or Snapchat, TikTok, cyberbullying, like all of this new stuff, but it's just manifestations of old things that people may experience. So I'm interested in how you all what are y'all conversations?
We have a lot. We talk about it a lot. We probably talk about activism, racism, and all these conversations so often. I sit and we just talk about it. We'll dissect the news together often. And especially as I've dived deeper into more activist roots, I've leaned on her a lot with, tactics, and she's proofread every single one of my speeches, I think, to this date, to make sure that they were coming off with the correct message and making sure that what I wanted to say was being said correctly, and has definitely helped me. And I've used her for a lot of different just insight into how to get involved in this, how to plan things. And you were an activist in your and planning
back in the day.
planning all these different things. And so when I kind of started doing that, I was lucky that I had this planner in the house that I could ask questions to.
Yeah, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. So it's like you say, we didn't have all the electronics. Everything was basically word of mouth or in your face kind of a thing, but people really don't change, and that's a shame. And sometimes she asks me like, well, why didn't this get settled 50 years ago or something? And I'm thinking the same thing. Why didn't this get settled before? So it's good to be able to, she keeps me sharp and young and tells me what's going on, things that I'd never heard of before. I mean, the terminology is interesting because like the word microaggression, I said, what? And then the other one that gets me all the time, and I never get it right, is POC, people of color. It almost sounds like colored people, and we're not colored anyway. So it's interesting how the terminology changes, but the meanings are the same. And so I think that I can help Raquel cope with the things she's going through just based on some of the stories that I've told her about my life.
You're muted, Rasheed. You're muted. There you go.
It happens at least once the webinar, right?
Yeah.
So, just thinking about that terminology, like, I think with who we all have on the phone, we've seen the designations for, Black people or African Americans go from colored, Negro, Black, Afro-American, African American, New African, Black, melanated. Like there's all of these, terminology. And, I think racial meaning isn't always like fixed. It's something dynamic and, means different things at different times. We're coming up towards the close of the program. But I do want to pose that question to Thomas's as well as the T's, Team T, the holidays. And then I also want to just get a little bit of some of y'all experiences that have lived in different parts of Alameda. And so maybe just like 1 or 2 minutes, if you can share, I'll go with Terrence and Kayati, any challenges that you faced here or experienced here in Alameda. And
you know what, Rashid? Helen just said something that I'd like to use as a segue to share with the group. She said, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what I want to say to Raquel is, Raquel, I was president of BSU my senior year at Encinal. I had a counselor, and there was also a Black math teacher, Frederica Reeves. She brought a professor from the African American Studies Department at Stanford to Encinal High. And when I saw him speak, I decided I wanted to go to Stanford. I told my counselor that that was my goal. He told me I'd never get in. Okay. So what did I do? I had my sister drive me down there, and I spoke to the admissions, the dean of admissions, a young Black guy named Leroy Barnes. And we're sitting there talking, and he said, so where else did you apply? And I said, USC, UCLA. He said, why those schools? And I said, well, those are the ones I see on TV playing football. And he said to me, he said, do you know you're sitting at the arguably number 1 or 2 university in the US? And I stood up to get ready to leave. And he told me, you won't get in if you don't apply. So don't let anybody stop you, young lady. Don't let them stop you. It's so important. And as much as Alameda was a nurturing community, there's some tendency to nurture to keep us in place. That's not your role. It is not for you. I'm done, Rasheed. Sorry.
no, thank you.
And I would like to just add that it was very common being, a black male in Alameda going on Park Street, going down to South Shore through Mervyn's. It was just, we just knew we were going to be racially profiled. So that was a very common thing. But more importantly, we had friends that we could play with at school, but their parents would tell them that you can't bring them to our house. So if that's not in your face, I don't know what is, okay? And then as I got older, I had Mr. Grant, who was like a second father to me. Like most of the Black kids that went to NCNL. And he was telling me in high school, you know, after I got into college, he told me, no, actually in high school, he told me that he had tried to buy beyond Broadway. And there was a covenant in place that prevented anybody of color from buying back there. So it was very much in your face. I learned how to navigate around it. Sometimes we would handle that on, if someone, you know, used the N-word, well, we would handle it like we did on the schoolyard. That was the end of it.
That fisticuffs.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the end of it.
No, James Brown said, I don't know karate, but I know Colorism.
You know, and that was the end of it. But you still had, you know, they always wanted to let you know who you were. And I had the same experience that Sandy did. My counselor at NCNL told me I would never get into Davis. And I told Mr. Grant, and he says, okay. So then when I got in and I graduated, Mr. Grant went, and I told Rasheed this story last night. He'd always say, let's go to the teacher's lounge. So I don't go to the teacher's lounge. I had nothing to do with these people, right? And he says, no, I come in, because I was working in banking then. I was with Citibank at the time. And we would go in there, and then I got to see the emperor naked, right? So now we're on the same level. We're adults now. And Mr. Grant would throw a question at me. And at first I didn't want to be in there, and I'd answer it. And it was just to let them see, this is somebody that you had certain biases about, and look what he's done with his life. And so we'd get out there and we'd start laughing because we'd see the reactions, you know, the body language, the uncomfortableness. And so we'd laugh out of there, and he goes, it's very important that you come back here because they need to see you. The kids at the school need to see you. They need to hear your story. So what I would say is I grew up with that, and you still see it today. And that's why when I see it, I'm not gonna give you the pleasure of me getting upset at you. I'm gonna come up to you and say, hi, how are you doing? My name's Daryl. And I break them down, you know, I make them uncomfortable, you know, and that's just the way it is. I mean, it's reality. That's what we do. When you walk in a room, they don't look at me as a man. The first thing they see is I'm a Black man, okay? And so I just knew that I think the difference in Alameda in terms of like with the policing at that time, because we were in sports, you had a lot of the police officers lived in town. They knew who we were. You know, we played Pop Warner, we played Park League baseball, Babe Ruth. So they knew who we were. But we also knew there was a certain amount of way of that we need to carry ourselves as well, you know. And that's the thing. It was just that way. You just knew. So, and a lot of that I learned at the boys club, you know, just interactions. You know, that was a great socialization for me. It really was.
You know, Raquel, when you go to In-N-Out and you see Willie Stargell Avenue, Willie Stargell was a professional baseball player and could not buy a home on the east side of Alameda.
Yeah.
And now he's got a street named after him.
Yeah, I mean,
push it forward.
Yeah, so it's just,
you can.
So you're gonna have these challenges in life. And I say challenges, I don't say problems, because challenges you can overcome, you know, but don't be the victim. It's about being the victor. And that's the most important thing. That's where you're going to make the impact on them, is let them see you for who you are, you know. And so now we have our, you know, we've had our George Floyd moment now, right? You know, and so now is an opportunity for you to stand up and really take advantage of the opportunities that are there. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. You're still going to face the same systematic racism, but you can, you know, continue to reach back and, you know, and try to move forward. And one of the things, the great lessons I got on Mr. Graham, he would always tell me that, because he did things for me that, you know, a lot of people don't know, but he would just tell me that when you get to a level, just reach back and help one, you know, and if we all did that, then I think we could just make it such a better place for everybody. So I just say that with all of these challenges that face in Alameda, I still love Alameda.
It's a great place.
It's a great place.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing those different stories. You know, I want to just clarify for three things for folks that may or may not be familiar. One, Raquel mentioned colorism. And so, you know, oftentimes maybe some non-Black folks might think we all look alike. We get mistaken for each other, but there's oftentimes differences that are made. So many of us have internalized Eurocentric beauty standards and ideas about, you know, if you're closer to white or lighter skin, you may be more intelligent or more beautiful. And then in the opposite direction, you know, there's these other negative characteristics that are associated with you, simply based on, you know, the color of your skin. And then there were two names that were mentioned. First, Mr. Grant, or Don Grant, who was a coach and an educator, first in the estuary projects, and then later at Encinal High School. And then lastly, Frederica Reeves, who was as I understand, the first Black female teacher at Encinal High School, and helped start the BSU with Vicki Smith and other Black students there. You're muted.
Yeah, not only was she the first Black teacher, she was a math teacher. She was STEM before they called it that. And she had a lot of quirks, and she was down for us.
Yeah.
And Joe King, Mr. King, was somebody who always had me come back and talk to his classes. So there's a lot of great support. Just go to those that support you, you know?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think, again, back to that question about, you know, the nuclear family or the extended family, right? There are folks who have families that have grown up together that have, you know, I think Leela shared earlier, chosen family. And so that definitely has existed and still exists and can exist in Alameda. You know, we're coming about 10 minutes, you know, out. I'm interested, maybe a quick, what they call it, round robin, to just, we talked about some of the challenges. I do want to give Terrence and Tayari a chance if they want to answer that question. But, you know, what are some victories or some successes that you've experienced here in Alameda? So we'll start with the holiday with Team T.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. We had to get the unmute access. Yeah, so challenges, victories, which one you want? You want both? You want I like to start with the victories. I'm so fortified with positivity. I'm not even tripping on anything negative or I push through challenges. We will push through challenges. Like, you know, that's you know, that's what life is for. So our victories, I mean, this is just a lovely environment. You know, we've been able to grow to a certain extent. Now, one thing we are concerned about is building legacy, and that's the one thing that I really would like to do is we would really like to do is to start planting seeds and maybe, you know, like grow our business here. I would love to work in education here in Alameda. I would love to contribute more and more to the community and serve it more. But that's something that really depends on if we can live here long term. And that's one thing that's just really not it doesn't seem attainable, you know, especially with the cost of living here in Alameda. But at the same time, we'll try to make more so we can afford it. But you know, I think that's kind of like a dual edge. You know, it is our victory, and at the same time, it is the thing that we are concerned with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the cost of living is high. It's high all over the Bay Area, though. So, you know, that's one thing. Of course, I can say I've experienced different microaggressions or, things happening here, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, where do I not experience that? It's not actually much different. I travel all over Northern California. I'm in Ukiah and Eureka and Walnut Creek and Sonoma. Um, and in those areas, as well as Alameda, like I always experience those things. In the same sense, we have neighbors that we love, that I'm attached to. One next door to us, she's Mexican, and she was lucky to get this house, years ago. It was when the Navy was like getting rid of all these homes. They owned a bunch of homes in Alameda and they were trying to get rid of them. And so she got it for a really good price. So, we have a community here that we love, and um, it's kind of worth the cost of living, I think, or it has been for us. And I own my own business. It's registered here in Alameda, so we're business owners. And yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
we try and look at the positive of like you said, of whatever we're experiencing. So
Yeah. But would love to see more Black businesses here. Would love to encourage that. I would love to work with some of the youth out here who, like, yeah, definitely. This is a place where we could see us spending the rest of our lives and living a legacy. I would love to be referred to like the Mr. Grants and those wonderful people who changed so many lives, and plant those seeds. So.
I will say this one thing. We have friends here, friends who are not willing to come visit us here though, because they just don't want to come on the island and deal with the cops or whatever. It's just a few people, but that is something that has been an experience.
Like, we're not coming to Alameda. It's just, I think it's just a reputation thing, like people don't want to drive through Alameda.
Yeah. And it's always a surprising thing because of the reputation, the negative reputation Oakland has, and fear. People from Oakland are afraid to come to Alameda.
Yeah.
Right.
So, we have about 5 more minutes. I want to just maybe do a quick round and just see, I wanted to get into some of the different experiences y'all had in the different parts of Alameda, but that'll be for, our follow-up conversations. I still got to get some interviews in with some of y'all, but I'm interested in just hearing from y'all, what's one thing you like about Alameda, share some of your experiences, and, what's one hope that you have for Alameda? And I'll start with perhaps our younger folks, because people like to think that y'all are more hopeful and optimistic. At least that's what Pew says.
Yeah, my hope for sure is just definitely that it can become more diverse, and that not only is it more diverse, but it's accepting of everyone's cultures. I think that it is a diverse group here. Well, it's starting to become more diverse, but it's like not, it's a little segregated. It's a little, you keep to your own, and we won't talk about our racial differences. A lot of times I'm in spaces where like, let's not talk about it. Like, we know you're a different race, but I don't see color. Let's just talk about something else. And I would rather we grow as a community where we appreciate everybody's racial differences. We appreciate them, and we can grow into like this super inclusive, tight-knit community where like everyone, what was their slogan about me? Like everyone belongs or something, where actually I think everyone can feel as if everyone belongs.
Yeah,
How about you, Omar?
I agree with that. Also, the same with like more inclusive and diverse. But I feel that, like in contrast to Raquel saying that there isn't, or that we kind of don't see race, or like we don't acknowledge that. I think that in some of my communities are like circles that we do notice it or do acknowledge it, and I want that to, grow into a more normalized thing, and not such of a I wish, but more as like a that is what it is. Like that's more of a natural thing to acknowledge the differences and just accept them, you know. And I think that maybe not even maybe, I definitely feel that it's more inclusive than previous generations. like compared to my parents to my group of friends, like I feel like that we're definitely in a more inclusive and diverse, you know, mindset or area than it was previously. And I think that in the future it's only gonna grow. So not even just hopeful for it, like I'm kind of confident that that's gonna happen.
Yeah, so we heard from Tayari and Tayati and Terrence, but I want to come back to y'all. You know, what's a hope that you have for Alameda? And I know in addition to hoping y'all will be able to be here and leave that legacy.
One thing I personally hope for is like what the young people said is for everyone to have a chance to thrive and to be happy and to live without having to work 25/8, and that means 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, without having to feel like, you know, this burden of just of having to just not being able to enjoy yourself and enjoy your family. Like if Alameda is a family environment, then my hope is that people can actually live their lives and grow their families and have their businesses and continue to make it a beautiful city that it could be. And it isn't. It is, but make it, you know, a more inclusive and beautiful city. You know, let it grow. You know, let the young people have it. What you got, babe?
Yeah. I hope that you know, I think like like Alameda doesn't become like San Francisco. And I hope that we don't allow these huge developers to come in with the mass gentrification and just kind of take over. But you know, I think that goes along with, you know, it being inclusive and a place where everyone can stay. Those are kind of some of the things that lead to that. So
And Leela, and then we'll go to Daryl, then Sandy, and end with Helen and then myself.
Hope that I have for Alameda is definitely for the young people to lead it, and to grow more, you know, inclusive businesses, and that the work that's being done right now in the district and the city hall, that work around inclusion and addressing white supremacy, that work will actually stay. And I know that, you know, there's histories of different, you know, policies here. And so I'm looking forward into the future that the work that everyone's doing, from the Raquels, you know, to the Rashids, that this is just a normal part of the work that we all do together. So I look forward to seeing the fruits of the action that's happening now, and that those, you know, it blossoms and it blooms, and we continue to provide safe and caring spaces for folks.
Go for it, Daryl. I know y'all got your whole sibling thing.
No, I think for me, is I would just hope that there's a lot more affordable housing opportunities, especially for Black families. So, because with those opportunities, that's where you can increase your net worth. And then on that, then you have a bona fide stake in this community, you know, and that's where you build pride from that. And that's, you know, that's my wish. You know, I understand that we need the development from the tax revenue, from the basis, because what we lost with the Navy, you know, we need that. But like, again, there should be an opportunity for people to have the low market housing as part of this. You're going to let these developers come in. Let's, you know, provide these affordable housing opportunities that are coming in here. I think, you know, I think that would change the dynamics of this community, because then now you're talking about real inclusion, and it's just not, you know, you're just not, you know, talking about it, but that's real inclusion.
Yeah, not just a slogan,
right?
But in reality. Sandy, and then Helen, please.
You're muting.
Look, I always tell people I'm logistically impaired, and then I prove it every time. So what I was saying is that I believe there are sort of three areas that make Alameda the gem it is. And gem, I mean GEM, not GYM. But It's the fact of public transportation. We live, what, within 5 miles of 5 BART stations. We've got 2 ferries. We've got all the express buses you need, including some, this was funny. My daughter said, Mom, that's so cute. That bus is going to MTV. And I said, no, Ava, that's Mountain View. But it was Google. And it parks right here at the golf course. But so getting back to my point, 3 things: public transportation, public schools, and public goodwill. Now, isn't it interesting that all of that comes from the public, but the public is being forced out because of wealth? And so my hope is that those things, public transportation, public education, and goodwill, continue to flourish in Alameda for my daughter and her cousins and their children. I think it really is the genesis of why this is such a special place. And those 3 things create the diversity that we all love. So those are my thoughts.
Cool. And last and certainly not least, Ms. Rainwater.
Okay, so I don't really have something to improve on, I think it would be nice once we get done with this COVID to have maybe some more social activities, because it's gotten kind of boring the last year, but a lot of it may be Alameda's fault. But then again, we didn't really have a lot of places to go when you get to a certain age or whatever, it could be some more diversity.
You know what I would like to see, Rashid? I think I can see 2 weed shops on Webster Street. I would like to see weed shops owned by Black people in Alameda. That's what I would like. Cannabis, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of other terms that could be used for that as well, but I believe cannabis is the terminology, and people do have some stuff around cannabis equity, and I don't think that happened here.
Right.
I started off part of this conversation talking about, housing, and just recently discovering this stat about the, just 165 Black homeowners here in Alameda. And of course, that's historically driven and not, our choice or our bad culture or something like that. And there was a group here in Alameda called HOPE, Housing Opportunities Provided Equally, and of course, restarted Renewed Hope. And so that focus around housing, because homes are where families live. Although, in our community, we have many families and people who are unhoused, but who still call Alameda and the Bay Area home. And so I definitely hope that, people can stay in their homes, be able to get homes, but also for people who have been displaced and forced out, having a right and opportunity to return. And so that's one of my hopes for Alameda. And, building on what Ms. Rainwater said, I hope we can hang out in real life, post-COVID and healthy. And I hope there can be more conversations and dialogues like this. And so I'm really grateful for you all for taking the time to share some of your stories with me, with us. I'm grateful for all of those who have taken time to tune in. And I'm really grateful for the library in the city for allowing us to create this virtual space. We can't be over on Oak Street by Old Bank Alley having this conversation, but we're able to do this virtually. And so I know there are so many folks who shared a few things to me via DM, and we didn't have an opportunity to answer those questions. And there's a lot of people who are on the line who could certainly share their stories, but I hope that we can continue to build with each other, and hopefully coming out of this, or while we're still in it, we can build that community and that extended family so we can get through it and beyond it. So with that, again, thank you all for being present. I want to pass it back to Sierra with the City of Alameda, the Free Library. And again, thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation for Black History Month 2021.
Thank you so much, Rashid. You're a fabulous moderator, always a pleasure. I really hope we can continue some of these conversations at the library at some point when we reopen. I also wanted to thank all the panelists for coming and sharing all your experiences about growing up in Alameda or coming to Alameda. Super interesting. Thank you to the Friends of the Alameda Free Library for generously supporting this event. In case you missed part of the program, we are recording this and it'll be available on the library's YouTube channel and the city's YouTube channel. So thanks again to the city for co-hosting.
Thanks all around. Okay, everybody have a great evening.
Evening.
Take
Good
care.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Rashid.